fancy titles is that I was a founding member and I'm current president of a housing co-op that has no land, so we're a housing co-op in development. Um, but titles don't mean much to me, so I'll explain to you a little bit about who I am and why I accepted to speak on this subject. What my background is. So I've got involved in what these people typically see as activism around 18 years old for Palestine solidarity stuff and Indigenous solidarity. But I come from a political family, so we're a third generation revolutionary family. My grandfather was persecuted during the Red Scare in the United States, had to move out of Chicago. I started, getting involved in anti-imperialist stuff and then local, also housing, organizing in public housing in Toronto, community and people's journalism. And then I also got involved in, I moved to Montreal, got involved in the student movement during the 2012 uprising. And I've done, a lot of different things. I don't want to do the whole list. But I did want to highlight what Julie just said, which was that I did work specifically, like through our anti-imperialist organizing and through our organizations, myself and this comrade, Julian, worked closely together, especially we knew each other from 2010, at least I remember you. I don't know if you remember me, probably not.
Yeah.
So I kind of knew of Julian around the 2010 stuff. I've been involved in that stuff too. And if for those of you who don't know, it's organizing around the displacement that comes with any Olympics games. So the Vancouver Olympics, the displacement that happened around that. And then the G20, G10 stuff that happened in Toronto in 2010. So there was the 2010 stuff. I already knew Julian, and I was doing anti-imperialist organizing, but I worked much more closely through the ILPS, through our various organizations, and eventually through kind of like dynamic duo, and sometimes, or just kind of, we developed like a camaraderie around that work. So Irish solidarity with political prisoners, and as well as the 10 cities. So getting involved in 10 cities from, I think it was like 2016, but especially 2017, especially until COVID. Mm-hmm. And then, so I would be going to Kitchener a lot, but also there was support that Kitchener did in Montreal. I was working with the non-status migrant workers. And so we did a lot of solidarity stuff, and we went on exchanges. People from Montreal came to Kitchener to support tent city organizing, among other things, community defense work, and international solidarity. So those are the things that I've done, and why I know this comrade, both organizationally, from his reputation, and then eventually personally. And I live here. I grew up in Toronto. My parents are both American, but I grew up in Toronto, but I've been living in Montreal now for 13 years. And I took some, I tried to study the history here out of, respect for the place that I live in. And so I'd like to talk to you guys a little bit about some of the anti-fascist organizing that's happened here, but the way I choose to talk about it is to talk about revolutionary history, because revolutionary history is by definition anti-fascist, and it's impossible to know the history and the lessons of anti-fascist organizing if you don't know the history of revolutionary organizing, including and especially communist and socialist organizing. So I'm going to draw a picture of that. The reason I say that is because fascism is how can I say this? So capitalism runs our society. Imperialism runs the world. And fascism isn't a tool of imperialism. So we have a world system that's imperialism. And the capitalists that run our society are participating in this world system of imperialism. And I say this because fascism is, and the rise of fascism is an inevitable and predictable thing that happens under capitalism and under imperialism. It's a predictable, reoccurring social fact, okay? And so we don't have to accept the victory of fascism. That's something that we can influence. But it's the rise of fascism is something that we can expect and that we should expect. In some places, fascism was victorious, as we know. But in other places, the rise of fascism, which happens inevitably as long as capitalists are running society, these things are going to happen. And in some places, fascism never did win. And so that's why it's important to follow anti-capitalist organizing and especially revolutionary communist and socialist organizing. Sorry, that's a lot of information, but I just want to explain the reasoning behind my presentation. And so I'm not going to go too much into the history of the 1800s, that's too far, but I do want to say that the French-Canadian people here, when they lost, as a colony, when they lost to the English colony, they experienced their own form of oppression and subjugation by the English. And this is an important thing to understand about the whole 1800s, is that even though, I'm not going to get into it, I just wanted to underline the fact that, and even though the French also colonized this land, because of the colonial mentality, because of the capitalist mentality, everything is hierarchical, right? It's like a caste thing, society. So as much as, indigenous people were on the bottom of the social ladder, and nothing can take that away from them. The French Canadians did experience their own form of oppression, and it's important to recognize that. And that's if people don't understand that, they can't understand the organizing history here. So that's all I want to say about the 1800s. If you are interested in looking up the rebellions of the Patriots in Upper and Lower Canada, the ones that they were hung by the British Crown, you can look that up. The alliances they made with Indigenous people, you can look that up. And revolutionary organizing in the 1800s looked like republicanism, which is the rejection of the monarchy, the rejection of colonialism, and the promotion of democracy and equal rights. So that's the Republican movement. That's the 1800s. In the 1900s, Montreal is still one of the most important cities in North America. Actually, it's an industrial hub and it's a port city. It's a huge economy. It plays an important role. And I just wanted to say that, the French Canadians, because they didn't want to fight because of the oppression they experienced because of their French language. For example, the political decisions were all happening in English. There was very low literacy rates. Kids didn't go to school. The life expectancy was much lower in the province we know as Quebec. And the church controlled much of the political world because of the Catholic Church specifically. Because of those things, Quebecers were opposed to fighting in the First World War. And if it wasn't for the First World War, we wouldn't have seen the rise of fascism, right, in Germany, which led to the victory of fascism and the Second World War. So resisting the war was part of an anti-fascist organizing, and there was a strong resistance to conscription in Quebec. And there's always been a communist party in Montreal in the 1900s, but it wasn't really French-Canadian. French-Canadians, because they didn't have a lot of access to reading and writing, were largely excluded from that organizing that was more based in migrant workers and was based in English Canada. And then what happened, what you see happened in Asia and a huge part of Africa, after the Second World War, people that were oppressed kind of were asked to go to war. They were given a gun and they were asked to run this service. So there was a huge shift that happened when people came back, because on the one hand, they spoke to other people from around the world. So their awareness of what's happening around the world exploded. They talked to other people. They were exchanging ideas like we're doing today, which is very important, exchanging of ideas and seeing things differently. French Canadians became much more aware of the ideas like socialism. And when they came back from the Second World War, a movement started to reject the oppression that they faced as French Canadians. So a form of nationalism that was very closely tied to socialism started happening, and that was the form of anti-fascist organizing. And the reason that was the form of anti-fascist organizing is because there's this thing called Orangism. I don't know if you spoke about it yet, Julian.
No.
Orangism is a form of for me, it checks all the boxes off of fascist ideology. Orangism is a less known form. It's Protestant supremacy. And so this is the colonial kind of ideology that allowed for England to colonize Ireland, but also is the second strongest movement of Orangism is in Canada. And specifically, you guys are in the homeland of Orangism in Canada, in Ontario. So Orangism was a form of oppression that Quebecers fought against. And it's based on the idea that Protestants, English Protestants specifically, should have supremacy over others. And they come in Orange Order. They're organized in these Orange Order organizations, and they terrorize Catholics, immigrants, Indigenous, using violence to deny them jobs or to ensure that the jobs that they get are highly exploitative. So when the French Canadians started organizing for their national rights under a socialist banner, that was a form of anti-fascist organizing. They were rejecting the fact that they wouldn't be able to speak French in the highest decision-making spaces in the national assemblies. All the politicians spoke English. And the other thing to understand is that there was a real, workers were French and the English were the bosses. That's how it was in Quebec, generally speaking. There's always been English-speaking workers in Quebec, but they're the minority. And so this very clear divide based on language and culture was important in Quebec. And that organizing started happening in the 50s. And then with what they call the Quiet Revolution, once the